You're listening to The Roots, a podcast from Minnesota AMA District 23 ARMCA. I'm your host, Jackie Reese. Let's dive deeper into what makes our district so great. Hey everybody, and welcome to a very special Memorial Day episode of The Roots. Now, before we get started, I would like to take the time to thank our active military members, our veterans, and especially those who paid the ultimate sacrifice for the freedoms we have here in our country. Today, we are joined by a longtime District 23 ARMCA member, a veteran himself, and the owner of Beeline Suspension, Bruce Schaapveld. Welcome, everybody, to episode 6 with Bruce Schaapveld. Bruce, how's it going?
Pretty good.
Good, thanks. So we have a very special Memorial Day episode of The Roots, and you are a veteran yourself. So I want to ask you, what does Memorial Day mean to you?
Time to honor those who didn't make it.
Yes, absolutely. So like I mentioned, you're a veteran and you're a District 23 ARMCA member. Can you share a little bit about your service when you were active military?
I served from 75 to 79 in the Marine Corps as an 0311 or a ground pounder. And traveled all over the world. Saw a lot of things.
Yeah.
Good and bad. And it's tough to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't have to say any more if you don't want to. So motorcycling is a big part of your life. At what point did you join District 23 ARMCA?
1971
Wow.
at Cambridge.
What was that like in the 70s?
Way different than it is today. We had only 3 classes, 125, 250 and open, A and B. There was no C class, there was no mini bikes, nothing. And it was 30-minute motos plus 2 laps. So you got a lot of track time.
Right.
But the bikes were nothing even close to what they are today. And so I still have a vintage bike, and I can't imagine, number one, the tracks have advanced way beyond the suspension of the old bikes.
Right.
And to the point where you can't hardly ride an old bike over a new track.
Yeah. So how was the track different back then?
The jumps were like the rollers are now.
Okay.
So we have back then there was 6 and 7 foot jumps, and you flatland everything. There was no doubles, none of that stuff. And the hardest part of the track was like the sand wash at Zumbro Falls and Millville. That was called Zumbro back then, but that was the hardest part. And the winner was usually the guy that survived it.
Really?
Yeah, and we had like the 125s back then produced like 11 or 12 horsepower.
Oh, wow. Nothing compared to today.
No, like the electric start on a 450's probably got more power than our bikes back then.
Do you have any desire to ride your vintage bike?
I used to, like once a year, and then my nephews that are like they're in their early 30s now, I let them ride it probably 10 years ago, just one lap around Morris track. And they barely made it around one lap. Said, no way, we're not doing this. So, but it's fun to, I have it hanging from the ceiling in my shop now because I just got tired of moving it around, and I knew I wasn't going to ever race it again. So
right. It's
just a reminder of where we've come.
Yeah. So what was your first bike?
It was a 72 125 Elsinore.
Wow.
Honda. Yep.
And how was it?
It was, at the time, it was state of the art. I mean, it was kind of the first Japanese really competitive motocross bike. And I mean, there was European bikes by the droves. There was so many that aren't even built now. But the Japanese had done such a good job in building a moto bike that, the CRs and stuff in 72 and beyond kind of took over the moto scene
Yeah,
because they made such a great two-stroke,
right.
lightweight. Yeah.
So how did you progress? Now, obviously you've been racing for, 50 years, right?
Yeah.
So how did you move through the bikes? Like what did you see over the years to your modern bike that you have now?
Well, they both have forks. They've gotten like 4 times the diameters, the damping abilities, and because I do suspension work, I've seen the insides of all of them for 50 years.
Hmm.
And the internals is what really makes it all happen. And the fact that motocross bikes are directly connected to competition at a super high level, that the advancements are really, they make huge differences.
Hmm.
You only have to ride a vintage bike in a parking lot to know the difference. you know so
Yeah.
yeah. And I mean, it's just mind boggling, the difference. To ride a vintage bike, there's pit bikes that handle better than our dirt or race bikes did back then.
I guess that's just a testament to how gnarly racers were back in the day, right?
Yeah, and 30-minute motos.
Right.
And the tracks didn't have water trucks. They didn't groom anything ever.
Hmm.
So the ruts got deeper and deeper. And I mean, you went from one weekend race to the next, and it was the same track it was the year before.
Right.
So
So, uh, were there certain tracks that you picked to ride earlier in the season compared to late because of that?
um, actually wasn't very many options.
Mm.
In 72, there was probably only 3 tracks in the state, and they maybe only had, I want to say, 2 races per track all summer. So,
Wow.
I can't remember the number of races, but there wasn't, no, and there was no practice tracks, nothing like that. You went on Sunday morning and you got 2 or 3 laps of practice, and then you raced.
So, how does it feel to see what we have now, racing in multiple tracks every single weekend, all tracks all over Minnesota? How does that change, impacted your thoughts on racing here in Minnesota?
Well, back then it was all club run,
Hmm.
and nowadays the only club run race is Grantsburg.
Hmm.
And the fact that it's become a private entity and a business for a lot of companies like Burnbenders and Barna Compound and Johnny Martins and all those guys, it's a business for them. So they really have to cater to the customer, the racer,
Hmm.
and do a better job than the other guy because the competition's so keen, just like our dirt bikes are. I mean, everybody makes a better one every year, because if they don't, nobody will buy their stuff. Or if they don't make a good track, the racer won't come to their track. So, and then they have their civil series, and they have the North Star series and all the cool things. So for me, I don't like to travel 2 hours to the racetrack every weekend. So it's nice that the tracks in my area have their own little series, so I can compete in that series and not have to travel the whole state to, you know, I understand the argument. Some would say that, well, then you're not the best in the state. You're just best in that series. And that's okay with me. I mean, I know I'm not the best in the state, and I never will be, but it's neat to compete with the same guys, you know, for me to keep, I have a camaraderie with my main competition. Him and I are best friends off the track. On the track, we're like deadly enemies. And we just have a blast doing it. So
Yeah, that's awesome. It's a true testament to how important grassroots motocross is, right? Like there's so
yeah.
much focus now on Loretta Lynn's and going pro and all that, but how great it can be to just race locally and within 2 hours of your house. So that's really awesome that you still participate. What is your favorite part about racing your best friend?
um Beating him. If in the last summer and this summer, with COVID and everything, it kind of put a damper on our fun. But
Mm-hmm.
anytime we hit the track, it's like game on.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can beat him, it's like, wow, made my month, you know.
Yeah.
And then he digs deeper and I dig deeper, and it's just a awesome battle. So
Awesome. Yeah, that's so awesome. You mentioned already that you have a suspension business called Beeline Suspension. Share a little bit about how you started doing that and why it's interesting to you.
it's called Beeline Control,
Okay,
and
sorry.
I started. That's okay. I started in the early '80s. I got involved in suspension work with Jack Struthers from Boise, Idaho, and Polaris racing cross country snowmobiles. And then, in the later years, snowcross started, and I did a little bit of that, like in 80, 82 area, when Quadna became the first real snowcross race. It was jumps and bumps on a ski hill. Prior to that, it was just on the ice, flat, pretty much flat. And, I thought, well, I've done motocross since 71. I said, this snowcross thing ought to be really cool. So that's how I got involved in suspension work with Fox. And then because I was a poor farm kid, I didn't have money to pay anybody else to do the work. So I had to learn to do, suspension work myself. And doing that, realized how important it was in terrain racing to make it handle better. Then I could beat the guys even that were better than me if I had a mechanical advantage.
Mhm.
So that's how it all started. So now with the as sophisticated as the components are, it's because I've done it for 50 years, it's not rocket science to me, but I understand when I'll help Jason Ritt or any of his boys, or guys, they'll come to my shop and I'll show them how they work internally, and they're just baffled at the internals and what little changes make such a big difference. They're just over the top, like, wow, this is so cool. and
So, sorry, go ahead.
and to educate them about the internals, they understand more how to tell me how to make it work better. And boom, I mean, we got a winning combination.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, uh, what is something the average racer should really focus on with their suspension? Maybe they're new to the sport, maybe they're new to racing with the district. What is something that they should be aware of with uh, suspension's health, I guess?
First, get the owner's manual and read the part about adjusting suspension. Yeah, because most people don't ever look at the book. If you do, they're so simple, and the manufacturer's been doing it so long, they can really, in layman's term, explain simply how to make it work better. And I'm baffled still at how many people will bring a suspension in for a seal change or something because they're leaking and have never changed the adjustments
Mhm.
ever and don't know. So when I get to a track and I can watch someone ride, I'll make an adjustment and they'll go, whoa, it's like, I didn't know that was there. And, Paul Feed from Race Tech says, you don't know what good is until you've had good.
Right.
And that's so true with motocross. It's just mind boggling, you know.
Yeah, for
And so,
sure. So, if people are interested in your suspension services, how can they get a hold of you?
um, I don't have a website or anything like that. I do Facebook, and they can call me at my shop, or I love it when they see me at the track
Hmm.
and I can help them. And I don't care who works on their stuff, even if nobody does, I'm willing to help and watch and learn. And it's so fun, especially to see the new guys and the young guys um, elevate their ability because their suspension is better.
Right. Yeah, it must be really rewarding to have an impact on that for sure.
It is, yeah.
What tracks do you frequent normally?
Berm Benders is my home track,
Hmm.
and I've worked with Kurt and Kelly for, I want to say 17, 18 years now. And
Wow.
I'm a sponsor of their events. And I hate sand, but Frank Barn has done such a great job with Cambridge now that I'll actually go race there now because it's not sand anymore. And I like to frequent each track once a year at least. And then because I'm an older guy, I like to do other things. I have a road bike. I like to road bike, and my wife and I, we both have road bikes, so we like to do that once in a while. So I can't do every weekend, but anytime I go to the track, it's good for my business because I get new customers and help people, and it's awesome.
For sure. Yeah, that's awesome. So you say Cambridge isn't quite sand anymore. I can't imagine what it was back in the 70s. That track specifically, how have you seen it change over the course of 50 years?
Well, it's been the same basic track for, oh, well, since the start. There's parts of the track that are exactly the same as they were back then. But because Frank has worked it so much, and he made a water trail for his tank truck, and he changes things up. I believe he listens to the riders. That's why things have gotten the way they have. It still gets gnarly rough because it's bottomless, but there's sharp edges underneath. There's some clay down in the woods areas and stuff. So it's not like super silty deep sand that just it's it's like riding a snow bike with front wheel on it in the sand. And you can relate to that.
Yep.
Yeah. So
So
yeah,
speaking of, oh, sorry, go ahead.
and because of that, Frank has made it, it's his business now. So
Mhm.
he does a heck of a good job. All of the promoters are doing stand-up jobs because they're trying to gain new customers and keep the customers they have, which is us, the racers.
For sure. So you mentioned snow bike, and earlier on you mentioned early snowcross. Did you
Mhm.
ever take to the track on the snow?
Oh yeah, yeah. In the 70s, or no, I'm sorry, in the 80s, like 81, 82, I helped Jack Struthers, and he did the first quad net, and I did too. I raced what they called Formula 56 then,
Okay.
and Formula 3, which was the big bore sleds, like the 600 triples and the uh, 670 skidoos, but we called them bathtubs back then because you sat down on the seat way back, and they were trail sleds modified to race snowcross. And
Mhm.
it was a battle just to keep them put them back together so you could do another heat. And sometimes it was only 3 or 4 lap heats, and
Mhm.
you were lucky if you could make the 3 or 4 laps to try and finish the race. And then Blair Morgan came along and started standing up because he was a dirt bike racer, and he didn't know he didn't know that's not how you rode them. And then Tucker came along, and boom, all of a sudden the chassis changed, the Rev first, and then was it the Pro X, and everything started to move forward, and they made the sled more like handle more like a dirt bike, so to speak. So
Right.
the development came from snowcross.
Yeah, that's wild. And I think even today they still have some problems with durability wise, how tough that is on those machines. So I know you help out Seth Fisher on the snow bike.
Mm-hmm.
How has that gone? How has snow bike been a little bit different for you compared to snowmobile or dirt bike?
Well, the what do you call it? Snow bike kind of started out the same way snowmobiles did. They made them for boondocking and trail riding, and then they put them on a snowcross track, one that's developed just for snowmobiles that have been snowcross racing for 30 years, 35 years. And all of a sudden they start breaking parts, and there was things just twisting them all to pieces. But there's a few companies now that have stepped up their game to make them a competition thing just for advertising, and that's all it is, because if you win on Sunday, you sell on Monday. So but to when Seth and I first started working together, I mean, he would go out there and do 3 laps and the thing was broken, so we'd put it back together, and he'd go back out and do 3 laps and it was broken again. And now they can go out there and you can tune on the suspension and try to make it better. And it's like a 10-foot long dirt bike. So
Mhm.
it's so different from motocross bikes. You can relate to that. You know,
Absolutely. Yeah, it's its
there's
own beast for sure.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, how has motorcycling impacted your life as a whole? Personally, my life would be very different if I didn't start riding dirt bikes at a young age. How has it impacted your life?
It is my life. I've done it since it's 1969. Um, I mean, it's my friends, family, everybody is involved some way with motorcycles, motocross, primarily motocross. I've done flat track, I've done drag race, and I've done all that stuff. But motocross is by far the most influence and the best. It's a family. Like they say, you can't choose your family, but you can choose your friends. And the motocross world is just that. They're
Mhm.
amazing. There hasn't been two people in the last 50 years that I wouldn't call my friends that I've been involved with.
That's awesome. So you mentioned a few other disciplines of motorcycling. Were any of those more favorited for you, like just the riding itself, or has it always been motocross?
Always been motocross.
Nice.
Um, Drag racing was fun for a little while. I raced 3-cylinder, two-stroke Kawasaki's on the drag strip, the Minnesota Dragway in the 70s.
Hmm.
And I raced flat track with a couple guys up in Cambridge, and there was another one we raced at. Can't remember what it was now, but it was kind of like it was on the clay anyway, but it didn't have the rewards that motocross has. So
Gotcha. So, what advice do you have for other riders, young, beginners, old? What is your advice overall?
well, you look at me and you have a good 50 years left. So it's like golf. You don't have to ever stop playing the game. You just get a lot slower doing it. and
If you're
and
smart, right?
if you're smart, and I've had a few injuries in my life, but I say it's risk versus reward. The reward for racing every race, it way outweighs the hurt that you get when you crash and you break something.
Hmm.
It just, I can't explain that part of it. But and people that don't race don't understand what are you talking about, you know
Yep.
so but it's rewards beyond anything else that I do.
Awesome. And to round out the podcast of our Memorial Day theme, you've been involved with Veteran MX, which has a Minnesota chapter here. Um, Tell us a little bit about what you know about the organization as a whole and how it's executed in Minnesota.
Well, Angela is tuned me in and told me more about it.
Mhm.
I just joined, I think it was at least early last year, but I don't know if I filled out the membership correctly or whatever. But I know that it's not a money making scheme. It's nothing like that. It's just a group of guys that, number one, are veterans, number two, race motorcycles. And so we can share two things, you know what happened on the race weekend and what happened over there.
Right.
So
That's awesome.
it's kind of cool.
Yeah, and I know that Burnbenders Raceway has a very special um, class on Memorial Day weekend. Do you plan to participate in that this weekend?
Oh yeah.
How are you gonna do?
Yeah, yeah, I'm gonna win
Oh yeah.
it. Yeah, yeah, I got a new Kawasaki late last year from Caswell Cycle, Kurt's
Nice.
dad. And
Awesome.
the thing fits me so good. And to get to race with all the vet guys, even if they weren't Marines, it's okay.
um, how can other people get involved with VetMX?
um Talk to Angela or yourself.
Perfect. Perfect. I
Yeah,
know they're on social media. So if
yeah.
there's any other veterans out there listening, it's a great way to, like Bruce said, get connected with each other and have some fun doing it.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me for episode 6 of The Roots, Bruce, and have an awesome weekend of racing.
So are going to see you up there, Jackie? at Bermbenders?
No, I'm going to spend Saturday at Spring Creek,
Oh,
unfortunately.
okay. Okay. Yeah, I suppose you want to get ready for Loretta regional qualifier.
No, I actually am taking the summer slow. Believe it or
Oh,
not, I'm getting older also, and
yeah.
and
Yeah.
need some
Okay.
free time. So
Sure.
just having fun this summer. It's gonna be good.
Awesome.
Change of
Good.
pace.
Good.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody else for joining us for episode 6 of The Roots. We will see you in 2 Mondays. Thanks for joining us. Catch us every other Monday wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on our YouTube page.